Forget New Year, New You. This season is about slowing down, locking the doors, and cozying up at home with the one you really want to do nothing with. Your dog. After the holiday chaos, those quiet nights with a blanket, a podcast, and your pup feel like the reset you actually need. Ollie helps make those moments easier with fresh protein-packed meals made from real human-grade ingredients, so your dog can enjoy some quality comfort food too. Choose from 5 recipes and get a personalized plan for your dog's needs. Meals arrive perfectly proportioned with a scoop and storage container, so serving is fast and mess-free. And with Ollie's in-app on-demand health screenings, supporting your dog is easy, ensuring more cuddles for many years to come. Visit ollie.com/truecrime and use code TRUECRIME for 60% off your first box.
On October 1st, 2019, Officer Andrew Phillips was working the second shift, 2 to 10:30 p.m., when he was dispatched to do a welfare check at a house in Londonderry, New Hampshire, a small New England town. He wasn't exactly sure what he was getting into. 2 men down in the house? The details seemed murky, as with many emergency calls when officers respond to crises in real time. Entering the modest split-level home, one of the first things Officer Phillips noticed was a gun, a black semi-automatic Glock handgun, on a cabinet in the hallway. Officer Phillips called out to alert the other 2 officers accompanying him about the gun. He went through the open door of a bedroom that was in disarray because of a house renovation project. A painter's tarp was on the floor, and the furniture pushed to the side.
Was there anyone inside that room?
Yes.
Okay. Tell us about that.
There was a subject who was later identified as Brandon Castiglione, was inside of the bedroom, just a couple feet from the doorway. He was on the floor. It's kind of hard to describe, like a fetal type position on his hands and knees with his hands on his head on the ground. He was kind of trembling. And there was another subject. I could only see his legs sticking out from behind a cabinet or a dresser that was in the middle of the room.
Did you hear him saying anything when you went inside?
He was mumbling. I couldn't make out what it was that he was saying.
Could you determine a general gist of what it was that he was doing there on the floor?
It was definitely odd, him being there. It was, as far as what he was doing on the floor, I don't know.
And I think you said that you saw someone else's legs in the room?
Correct, yes.
Did anyone, could you describe the position of those legs that you saw?
So like I said, they were sticking out from behind a dresser. I could tell by the orientation that the subject was on his back, and his legs were bent.
Did anyone check on that person?
Yes, Officer Morin did.
Was Officer Morin the first person to go in that room?
Yes.
Okay. And when you say checked on him, how did he do that?
Officer Morin walked around. The furniture was all pushed in towards the middle. I couldn't see him, but I heard him say that it appeared that the male was deceased.
Was that male laying on his back, as you described it, was he ever identified?
Yes.
Who was that?
Luis Garcia.
Luis Garcia, the deceased man laying in the bedroom, was a pastor at New England Pentecostal Ministries. He had been shot in the neck from behind at close range. A few feet from his head rested a single shell casing on the floor.
The bullet that went through Luis's body and struck this wall and collapsed down onto the ground, which caused Luis to collapse down onto the ground. When you have to consider what the defendant's intent was, I want you to consider this bullet. A hollow point bullet, which you heard from Gilterio, is designed to open up on impact, and they have little petals that look like almost like a flower. This bullet that made Luis instantly drop. His spinal cord sending signals to that spot in his neck, pulpified, obliterated, gone. He cannot breathe. And he bled for as long as his heart could keep going before the oxygen deprivation stopped it altogether. He may have been unconscious. One would hope that he was. Because the alternative is horrific. That this man, who had asthma so bad that he couldn't work in a packaging plant anymore, had to leave that refrigerated environment, may have died conscious, aware, and unable to breathe. And the defendant did nothing to help him. The blood stayed where it fell. Exhibit 109. It's not tracked all over the floor. It's not all over the defendant. You won't see any of Luis's blood on him in his booking photos, not on his jeans, not on his arms or his shirt, and not on his clean white socks. And he was so wrapped up in prayer for Luis that he didn't hear anyone call, pound on the doors, ring the bell, throw acorn or anything. He didn't take one step near Luis.
Officer Phillips reacted quickly and handcuffed 24-year-old Brandon Castiglione when he saw him in the house. "Just pray. Keep praying," Brandon said to his sister, who was standing outside as he was let out. Brandon was detained in the back of a police car. He was crying, snot running down his face. He hunched over and appeared to be praying, according to a Londonderry police sergeant.
He was mumbling some words. The only thing I could make out was the word Jesus. And at some point, I believe something along the lines of, "Let Jesus tell the truth."
What'd you do after you first observed the defendant in the back of that cruiser?
I read him his Miranda warnings. I asked and inquired about his health and well-being, to which he didn't respond to anything.
Back at the police station, Brandon was taken into a detention room that was under video surveillance. He knelt down, still praying. Had he really murdered the pastor? The investigation was now underway. This is Jillian in partnership with Law and Crime. You are listening to Court Junkie, episode 276. Pastor Luis Garcia preached on Sundays, but when he got off the pulpit, you could find him with a paintbrush in his hand. He did odd jobs to earn extra money. The prosecutor explained more during opening statements.
In the weeks leading up to October 1st of 2019, Luis was working, as I said, in the defendant's home in Londonderry. It's a home that's owned by Mark Castiglione, the defendant's father. And the defendant and his dad were the only two people living in that home at the time. Luis had spent about 2 or 3 weeks before that day going room to room, doing small repairs and renovations for Mark. He had stripped wallpaper, sanded, and painted some rooms. And on that day, he was working in the last bedroom on the left down the hallway. He was sanding and painting. It was a room that Mark had turned into an office. And at the time, all of the furniture had been moved to the center of the room and was covered with a painter's tarp. Now, during those 2 or 3 weeks, you'll hear, as we expect you'll hear, from Mark Castiglione himself, that he would leave for work around 6 a.m. every workday. And he'd travel to Billerica, Mass., where his job was, and he'd stay there until he came home in the afternoon or evening. Luis, as you'll hear, would leave his house in Manchester around 8 a.m. every day. And he'd travel to Londonderry about 20 or 25 minutes to the Castiglione residence. And he'd stay there while he worked on whatever project he was working on. For the rest of the day after Luis would arrive, it would be him and the defendant inside that home. You're going to hear that on days that Luis was working in that house, Mark Castiglione would regularly call him on his first break of the day at 9:30. He'd call him to check in on progress that he was making, to see what room he was working on that day. And as Mark would put it, Luis answered those calls consistently. But that changed on October 1st, 2019. Because on that morning, Luis did not answer Mark's calls.
Luis would check in once or twice a day with his wife. On the day he died, he didn't call or text her at all. When Mark couldn't get a hold of him, he tried calling his son Brandon, Brandon didn't answer either. Brandon lived with his dad and didn't appear to have a job, so he was often at home. Mark was concerned enough that he called his daughter Danielle, Brandon's sister. That morning, around 10 a.m., Danielle texted Brandon a link to a Christian music song, but he didn't reply back. She texted him again 2 hours later.
Within that teal section, is that the message that you wrote to Brandon?
Yes.
Okay. Could you please read it for us?
I had a horrible dream last night. I hope you're doing okay. I'm going to be honest with you. I'm really concerned about you. I love you so much, Brandon.
Spot on, I'm sorry, but what time did you send that text?
12:51 in the afternoon.
Brandon wasn't responding, so Danielle drove the 40 minutes to her dad's house to check on him and Luis in person. Her grandmother, Frances Pestana, met her there. Frances was also an active member of New England Pentecostal Ministries. She was a greeter and went to church picnics and Sunday fellowship. On Thursday nights, she and Brandon would join the church in visiting a nursing home to pray and visit with the elderly. Frances was close with Pastor Luis Garcia and his wife, and she invited them to temporarily stay with her at one point when they had first moved into town. The two women found the house locked. Luis's car was parked in the driveway. They walked around the house and could see a bedroom light on in the window. Danielle threw pebbles at the glass. They tried yelling, but still nothing. Danielle called her dad back. Mark told her about a spare key underneath the front mat that was always left out for Luis, so he could get inside to paint. Here's what Frances testified happened when they unlocked the house and went inside.
Are these the stairs that you go up?
Yes.
And which way do you turn when you get to the top of those stairs?
I remember getting to the top of the step, and I was yelling, "Brandon, Garcia, where are you?"
She said she walked down the steps and down the hall, all the while yelling Brandon's name.
I got to the end, and Brandon was right at the door in a fetal position, going back and forth, going back and forth. And I said, "Brandon, you okay?" I tapped him on the back. "Brandon, what's up? You okay?" He didn't answer. He just kept going back and forth.
Did you hear? Were there any noises?
Nothing. No noises.
Have you ever seen him like that before?
No.
What happened next?
So when he was in the fetal position going back and forth, I kept saying, "Brandon, you okay?" And I said, "Where's Garcia?" And the minute I said that, they had furniture in the middle of the room, because Garcia, I was assuming, was painting in that room.
Okay.
I saw one leg up, and I walked around.
Around what or who?
The furniture. And he was leaning on his back. And there was blood everywhere. And I went, "Oh my God." So I stepped over him and I ran down the hall, ran outside. And I think I called my husband and I said, "He's gone, he's gone."
When you got outside, did you stay with Danielle and the kids, or did you go somewhere else?
No, I stayed right there.
Robert Mercier, a software developer who worked from home, lived in the neighborhood with his wife and kids. On October 1st, he had back-to-back-to-back Zoom meetings in the morning. So by the afternoon, he needed to get some fresh air and stretch his legs. He was tired of sitting in front of his computer, and so he went to walk his dog.
Did you pass 15 Ridgemont Drive on your walk?
Yes.
Did you see anything out of the ordinary at that time?
I heard something out of the ordinary.
What was that?
There were two women at the house, one in the driveway, one on the doorstep or around the door or whatever, and they were yelling back and forth to each other.
Could you understand what they were yelling?
At first, no, but as I got closer and was at sort of the bottom of the driveway, I could understand it.
Okay. What were they yelling about?
There was a lot of back and forth of he's down, Garcia's down, he's not breathing, there's blood everywhere. What about Brandon? Is Brandon okay? Brandon's just sitting there, but he's okay. They mentioned something about they were supposed to be painting today.
Okay.
Yeah.
How did they appear to you? What were their emotions like?
Well, they pretty much matched what they were saying. There was a little bit of concern. Obviously someone had been hurt, and so their demeanor, their actions were sort of matching that.
Brandon Castiglione was arrested the same day Pastor Luis Garcia's body was found and was charged with murder. His trial started in May 2023. Testifying for the prosecution was Patricia Garcia, Luis's wife. They had been married for 26 years. Their wedding anniversary was just 4 days after he was killed on October 5th. Patricia described her husband as a man rarely idle. Throughout his life, he worked at a refrigerated meat packing facility, a seafood plant, and at a check cashing business. But an asthma attack made him unable to keep going, so he began painting to earn extra money, which is how he ended up at Brandon's dad's house in the fall of 2019. Mark Castiglione was getting married and wanted everything to look nice. She said when Luis wasn't painting, you could find him at church. He was devoted to serving others. He fed the homeless. She testified that they cooked for the congregation members, too.
He was a minister.
A minister?
Yes.
What does that mean to be a minister at that church? Can you describe that for us?
Well, at any of the churches, people would call on you in the middle of the night. He stopped a lot of people from committing suicide. Baptized people, married people, counsel.
Even though he was in his early 20s, Brandon Castiglione lived at home with his dad, Mark. According to court testimony, he didn't have a car or a driver's license. He got rides from his dad and from people at church. He attended Bible studies and prayer groups and other activities at church in the evenings a few times a week, not just on Sundays. He had just attended a Bible study with the Garcias a few days before the murder. According to the New Hampshire Union Leader, Brandon had a criminal past and had court cases stemming from drug-related charges and disorderly conduct. Quote, perhaps the most significant charges were in 2013, when Londonderry police discovered marijuana, hash oil, psychedelic mushrooms, measuring tools, cash, and several guns, including assault-style rifles, at his father's house, according to court documents. Police also seized more than $1,500 in cash. Brandon's loved ones were hopeful that he had changed. Under cross from Brandon's attorney, Patricia spoke more about his involvement in the church.
Brandon was very frequently at Bible study.
Yes.
You saw him there?
Yes.
Your husband saw him there?
Yes.
You indicated sometimes Bible study was at your house?
Yes.
So Brandon had been over to your house for Bible study?
Yes.
You indicated that sometimes it was at Mark's house?
Yes.
Mark is Brandon's father?
Yes.
And Brandon was living at Mark's house?
Yes.
So you and your husband had been over to Bible study at the Castiglione house where
yes.
Mark and Brandon lived?
Yes.
According to Mark's testimony, Brandon had been attending the church for a few years and had a good relationship with Luis.
What was their relationship like?
Pretty good.
Did you ever see them have disagreements?
Well, disagreements maybe on scripture, but everyone did.
Mm-hmm. So tell us a little bit about that then.
Well, we'd be reading scripture during, for instance, the Thursday night, and everyone might have their own interpretation. And he was no different from anybody else as far as it was a little less. Some people were louder than others. Brandon was actually soft spoken of the group, but everyone had their own interpretation of what we were talking about. Mm-hmm. So we discussed it. Yes.
Was Brandon passionate about those discussions?
Passionate, and he's passionate about the word. Yes.
About how often would specifically Brandon and Luis get into those disagreements?
Not too often. I remember a couple that, again, he's one of the soft-spoken of the crew, but everyone, went back and forth with things. Some people were louder than others. And everyone, again, he was no different than anybody.
In the weeks leading up to October 1st, 2019, have the two of them been doing anything together? And outside of church or Bible-related activities?
Oh, yeah. Well, during the time, a few weeks prior to that, Louis was working on painting my house, and Brandon was there most of the time. So they did stuff together.
Do you know of any specific activities they did?
Yeah, I know they might have went out for coffee, but I believe they went out shooting not too long before the event.
Did they go to a firing range?
I believe so, yes.
And how long before October 1st was that?
Could have been a matter of a week or two or so.
So Brandon went shooting with Luis. Did Brandon have a gun at the time?
Yes.
Did he have just one or more than one?
Well, he had, I think he had another one. He had a Glock, but he had a Sigma 22, I believe, which he actually gave to Louis, I believe.
So you said he had a Glock, is that right?
Glock, yes.
Okay, and then a Sig 22?
Sig 22.
But he gave that to Luis?
I believe so, yes.
When did he give that to Luis?
It wasn't that long prior to, during the time of the event.
That was before October 1st?
Yes.
So at the time of October 1st, did Brandon only have the one gun then?
I believe so.
During Cross, Mark was asked more about the disagreements Brandon would have with Luis.
And just to clarify, when you say disagreements, you're talking about what passages in a Bible means. Am I understanding that right?
Yes.
Okay, so when we're talking about disagreements, people aren't, fighting. They're disagreeing about what passages mean.
Yeah, exactly.
Okay. And it wasn't just Brandon and Garcia, right?
Oh, no, everyone got involved usually with their own, take on what it meant to them.
You talked on direct about Brandon and Garcia being friends, right? Sorry, yes. You have to answer out loud.
Oh, I'm sorry, what was the...
I said you talked a little bit on direct about Brandon and Garcia being friends.
They were friends, yes.
And they did things together within the church?
Within the church and outside the church. And
outside the church?
Yes.
And would those typically be when Garcia was painting, or was this a relationship that went even before the painting?
Yeah, I'm sure there was occasions, like I said earlier, that they went out shooting not too long before that event. And also I know that they probably went out to coffee or something like that. I know they did a couple things at least prior to that.
She asked about the possibility of someone else coming over while Luis was painting.
You were asked some questions about whether Garcia had people over when he would be painting.
Okay.
And I just want to ask you, do you know if he had people over when he was painting?
Not that I know.
Okay. Do you know if anyone came over to help him?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Do you know if anyone ever came to see him there?
I can't say for sure. Like I say, I'm not there. I can just say that not that I'm aware of.
Okay.
Luis was one of the elders in the church and had the responsibility of overseeing security. In his mentor role, he had tried to look out for Brandon, who had seemed to be going through a tough time. But perhaps Luis had another reason to take interest in Brandon, since he was also responsible for keeping the church safe. According to Bishop Stanley Choate, the church was becoming concerned about Brandon's behavior leading up to the murder.
Had you ever seen the defendant and Luis together?
Yeah, they would be together sometime. Minister Lewis would always try to, encourage you to talk to him.
And so you saw him try to encourage and talk to him?
Yeah.
Okay. When did you see that? What sort of events would you see that at?
It would probably be after service of a Bible study when we come together.
You stated a moment ago that Lewis talked with the defendant about just trying to counsel him in the faith.
Yes.
Before Lewis was murdered, in the weeks leading up to before Lewis's murder, what was the defendant's behavior like at the church?
I had that much encounter with him, but when I did see him, it just seemed like he was withdrawn.
Withdrawn?
Yeah.
Less than 2 weeks after Pastor Luis Garcia was shot and killed, another violent incident connected to the Garcia and the Castiglione families happened at the church. One headline read, "New Hampshire wedding shooter may have been avenging late stepfather's murder," authorities say. It was October 12th, 2019, the day of Pastor Luis Garcia's funeral and 11 days since his death. Also on this day, Mark Castiglione was getting married. If you remember, the reason why Mark had hired Luis to paint his house was to spruce it up for the wedding reception. Although Luis was now deceased and Mark's son was charged with his murder, the wedding was still going on. Both events, Mark's wedding and Luis's funeral, were scheduled at the New England Pentecostal Ministries, just hours apart. As Mark was saying his I do's, Luis's stepson, 37-year-old Dale Holloway, opened fire and shot Mark's 60-year-old bride in the arm, as well as Bishop Stanley Choate, who you just heard testify at Brandon's trial earlier, in the chest. In a scuffle, Dale also hit Mark in the head with the gun. All three people, the groom, the bride, and the 75-year-old bishop, survived. In late 2023, Dale Holloway was convicted of multiple charges, including 2 counts of attempted murder for what the media called a revenge shooting. He was sentenced to 40 years to life in prison. This episode is sponsored by Little Spoon. Back to school season is here. And as many parents know, that's like the Super Bowl of parenting, where we're rushing around getting supplies, back to school outfits, making those little personalized boards so we can have our kids stand outside on their first day holding them for pictures. The last thing you want to have to worry about is meal and snack time for your kiddos. That's why Little Spoon has been a godsend when it comes to feeding my kids healthy, balanced meals in a convenient way. They deliver ready-to-eat meals and snacks right to your door for every eating stage, from baby to big kid. Plus, they're so helpful when it comes to prepping school lunches. You can make sure that you're giving your kids the proper nutrients with food that they will actually eat. Now, we have quite a history with Little Spoon. My little one loved the baby blends when he was first starting his solids. Baby blends are fresh, organic baby food from single ingredients to multi-textured purees. And Little Spoon partners with the Clean Label Project to test their blends for 400-plus contaminants, including heavy metals, so you can be confident in what you're giving your little one. Now my little guy is 1. And he has moved on to Biteables, which are early finger food meals that are cut to size to promote easy self-feeding. They're also healthy, balanced, and free of artificial junk. For my 6-year-old, she's been enjoying their plates, which are toddler and big kid meals that even your pickiest eater will love. Think hidden veggie mac and cheese, chicken nuggets. And then you have the more adventurous plates like pot stickers and gnocchi. Little Spoon also offers other great options, like smoothies, puffs, snacks, and lunchers. I tend to try everything I give my kids, and even I think these meals are tasty. And did I mention it all comes right to my door? So flexible, so easy, and everything stores right in the fridge and freezer. I pick the menu and change up what I order every time. The price is right, the quality is unmatched. I love it, my kids love it, the grandparents love it. A huge win-win-win for my family, and it can be for yours. Simplify your kiddos' mealtime with 30% off your first order. Go to littlespoon.com/quart and enter our code QUART at checkout to get 30% off your first Little Spoon order. Court Junkie is brought to you by Progressive Insurance. Let's face it, sometimes multitasking can be overwhelming. Like when your favorite podcast is playing and the person next to you is talking and your car fan is blasting, all while you are trying to find the perfect parking spot. But then again, sometimes multitasking is easy, like quoting with Progressive Insurance. They do the hard work of comparing rates so you can find a great rate that works for you, even if it's not with them. Give their nifty comparison tool a try, and you might just find getting the rate and coverage you deserve is easy. All you need to do is visit Progressive's website to get a quote with all the coverages you want, like comprehensive and collision coverage or personal injury protection. Then you'll see Progressive's direct rate, and their tool will provide options from other companies all lined up and ready to compare. So it's simple to choose the rate and coverages you like. Press play on comparing auto rates. Quote at progressive.com to join the over 28 million drivers who trust Progressive. Progressive Casualty Insurance Company and Affiliates. Comparison rates not available in all states or situations. Prices vary based on how you buy. Prosecutors maintained that although they couldn't prove why Brandon Castiglione had murdered Pastor Luis Garcia, they didn't have to. That the physical and circumstantial evidence against him was enough.
This is not a case of some complicated mystery where we're trying to figure out who killed Luis. The defendant did it, and the evidence you'll hear throughout this trial will prove it. One bullet, one casing, one pistol, and one man, Brandon Castiglione.
Among the evidence the prosecution presented was Brandon's gun that had been found just feet away from him at the home where Luis was shot, and Brandon's fingerprints on the gun. The casing fired from the gun matched ammunition that Brandon kept in a locked cabinet by his bed. The defense argued, however, that investigators had tunnel vision and didn't bother investigating anyone else for the murder. They didn't call any witnesses to the stand. But in his closing arguments, Brandon's attorney, Wade Harwood, argued that Brandon was innocent in what was a purely circumstantial case. He said there was no evidence showing Brandon was the killer and that he had actually fired the gun.
Brandon Castiglione is not guilty. The police jumped to conclusions. Within 2 minutes of the first officer arriving on the scene, Brandon was in handcuffs in the back of a police car. And because the police jumped to that conclusion, they did not do a thorough investigation. And as you've heard, they only looked for evidence that pointed at Brandon.
He told the jury that investigators didn't test for gunshot residue on Brandon's hands or clothes. That evidence could have proven whether or not Brandon fired the gun. He also pointed out that there were no eyewitnesses to the crime.
You heard in the government's opening statement them say how simple this case is. One bullet, one gun, one man. One man that they can't put in the house at the time of the shooting. One man that they can't say fired a gun that day. One man who had no reason to shoot his friend. What the government doesn't want you to think about is 4 very important words in this case. Beyond a reasonable doubt. You've heard that several times throughout the case. The government has to prove their case. Brandon doesn't have to prove anything sitting there.
He said Brandon found Luis dead in the home.
You heard Brandon is a deeply, deeply religious man. You heard he often prays. You heard that's very common for him. You heard that when he prays, he shuts out the world. Ladies and gentlemen, it is not surprising that when he finds his friend killed, shot in the head in his own house, he comes back, finds that body. It's not surprising that for Brandon, what made the most sense was to pray. Certainly, would some other people have called 911? Yes, I think many would. But Brandon, what made sense to him was to pray. The fact that he did not call 911 does not make him a murderer.
He said the fact that Brandon's fingerprints were found on the gun isn't a surprise.
And you heard the fingerprint expert, Rachel Martinez, tell you, she can't say anything about the age of those prints. She can't tell you when those were left on the gun. The only thing she can say is that those prints were left sometime after the gun was manufactured. That's all. Those prints could have been there for weeks, months, years. Those prints don't tell you anything about whether Brandon fired that gun that day.
Both the prosecution and the defense admitted that there was no clear motive why Brandon would have killed Luis.
There is no physical evidence that Brandon fired a gun that day. That is a reason to doubt. Brandon had no reason to shoot his friend. That is a reason to doubt. There are many reasons to doubt the government's case. The government did not prove its case because it could not prove something that did not happen. Brandon Castiglione did not shoot Luis Garcia. Brandon is not guilty.
Prosecutor Benjamin Agati presented closing arguments for the state.
4 days before her wedding anniversary, Patricia Garcia found out that her husband was not okay. And now that ring on her hand was from a man who was never going to pick up that phone again. And a family, a sister, a grandmother, Danielle Paduano and Francis Pastana, they saw what their brother and grandson had done with his hands. And it was not a dream. It was a nightmare. Simply put, there is no mystery who the murderer is in this case. It's the defendant. The same man locked inside his house with Luis and no one else there but the two of them. His pistol locked inside his cabinet. This gun that was used to kill Luis Garcia by shooting him in the back of the head. And in the process, left fingerprints on it. His spent bullet casing on the floor, the one that came from his gun. Loaded from his ammunition from the top drawer of his bedside cabinet. The same as the only bullet casing in the room where Luis was shot and killed. And from this casing, his bullet on the floor. The one missing two pieces that was still in the back of Luis's neck. The bullet fired from that gun. And the only bullet in the room. It wasn't self-defense. It wasn't an accident. This was not a botched investigation. And it wasn't some mystery man like the defense wants you to speculate about.
As for the defense's argument about the untested gunshot residue, he said that evidence was inconclusive and would not have provided answers one way or the other. He said Brandon was found lying by the victim, so he would have been contaminated by a cloud of chemicals from the gun having been fired.
We'll never know why the defendant murdered Luis. We only know that he did. We only know that he shot him, and he knew it would kill him. And the charges in this case don't require the state to prove motive of why he killed Luis. That's important. That's worth repeating. Motive is not an element of the crime of murder. It's impossible to read a person's mind. We can speculate why he did it, though, can't we? Was it an argument over religion? Over Luis's role of the church, overseeing security, stopping the defendant's behavior there? Something from the midnight prayer session the night before, maybe. Why he called Minister Eddie? Was it resentment of the counseling that Luis was giving him and trying to tell him what was and what was not? A disagreement over what the word was? Was the defendant contrasting his own situation and coveting Luis's stable life and faith? We don't know. And we never will. And as much as we want the why, and why do we want the why? We want the why because it makes sense of the senseless, right? The why isn't something that the state has to prove. Just the who. Who killed Luis? And he's sitting right behind me right now. The same person whose behavior and demeanor had changed in the weeks leading up to the murder. And the testimony that we heard definitely shows he was thinking about Luis. So if murder did have to be shown, then that would be an indication that something had shifted, possibly towards homicidal thoughts. Were the two men friendly? That's what we heard. Was there tension? Was there disagreement? Was there conflict between the two men? We definitely heard that too. Again, even though motive is not something we have to prove, you can and should consider that it was the defendant who is the only one that you have heard has any motive to kill Luis. And again, it's an ugly truth, but we know it's a truth. People do terrible things sometimes for no good reason. No reason at all.
The jury deliberated for 2 hours. The verdict? Brandon Castiglione, now 28, was guilty of second-degree murder. At his sentencing hearing, Brandon represented himself. His defense attorney didn't speak. Brandon read a short letter to the court.
It was mainly, I wrote this already. It was addressing to the court, but I'd like to address it, with the family, the court. I didn't know exactly how it was going to proceed, so I wrote it addressing the court, but the family as well. It was, I first want to express my sympathy and deep condolences for the loss of Luis Garcia. The last 4 years have been a tough time, not only for Louis and his family, but everybody that was involved in the situation. I considered and still do consider Louis a dear friend of mine. We enjoyed many things together, church, prayer, dinner together. It's a sad thing that this world brings to us. We have to get through this as God and the people it brings to us. Sometimes I sit and question myself why certain things happen as they do. It brings me to a point that the fact that God has our best interest in mind. I know one day God will restore us and bring our hearts back together. Thank you.
Brandon asked the judge for a fair punishment. After hearing the testimony at trial, the judge said that there had been no clear motive for why Pastor Garcia had been killed. It's normal for people to want to understand why a crime happened and why somebody did what they did, he said. But in this trial, it was unsatisfying for everyone involved, from the victim's family to Brandon's family, because no clear motive was ever determined. The judge said he wasn't sure if Brandon and Luis's Bible study arguments sparked the motive. He also acknowledged the tragic nature of this crime. A wonderful man had been shot in the neck with a hollow bullet. He sentenced Brandon to 42 years in prison. That would make Brandon eligible for parole when he is 64 years old. The judge noted that is the same age Luis would have been if he were alive today. And that's all for this episode. This episode was researched and written by Gabrielle Russon. And as always, I'd love to hear your thoughts on this case. Join the conversation on Instagram at CourtJunkie, on Twitter or X at CourtJunkiePod, or you can email me at podcast@CourtJunkie.com. To check out my Patreon options, you can go to CourtJunkie.com/support. Thanks again for listening. Until next time.